ladies. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial business owner, the founder of Shalo Glow LLC, an all-natural skincare company that helps you glow from head to toe. I am a champion for your daily self-care, business care, and intentional wellness.
Hey, y'all. I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, published author, and dancing social worker who helps you upgrade yourself and community care.
Together, we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness.
And the co-founders of Women Connected in Wisdom community.
We like to get together every week to have intentional conversations with our expert guests about how to be wise in business and relationships and wellness. How do we do it?
All through the transitions, through all of this stuff, right? Through learning new things, talking about school. That's what I've been thinking about.
We're in the start of fall.
Oh, I love it. It's reminding me. And you know what's crazy? Guess where I just was, Christine?
Tell me.
The band field. I went back. Went back to Hiram.
How was it?
That was beautiful. Yeah.
Good memories there.
Well, it was interesting. Hiram is where it's like, again, when we talk about not holding it, but acknowledging the grief and the gratitude, right? Hiram is an amazing school, did a lot, right? NHS president, Beta Club secretary, band section leader, all these things. And dad had just got divorced, sick with cancer, healing from that, finding, you know what I mean? Just different transitions. So that's life. And how to be a leader is show up and hold meetings, and you have all this stuff going on at home is what prepares me to do this, prepared me to be a manager. So we were talking about intellectual wellness, which is what we're talking about today, and transferable skills before the call, right? So this is where part of that started. That's what I think about when I think about Hiram. So, hey, Coach Co.
Hey, Coach Co. Thanks
talking
for
about the
joining
schools
us today.
Yeah, talking about the school. Shout out to our teachers who are on fall break, about to go to fall break, coming back, depending on where you are in the country. If you're back in the school system this year, thank you for everything you're doing.
Right. Yeah, since we last talked on air, new month, new season, new all kinds of new quarters, right? It is on, Courtney, right?
Right on.
Talking about the festivals, the fall festivals, fall break,
oh my goodness. And we just had a music fest. We had a music fest as of today. Yes, on break, Cole. Get some rest. You get to relax, girl. Like lay down when you do nothing. Think about us after you finish doing nothing. Not even while you're doing it, okay? Learning new things and how you make it a habit. Last night I was watching this episode of, I think it was Live to Be 100. And they were talking about the blue zones and centennials and healthy habits, right? And I was so grateful for what we do on this podcast and talking about preventative medicine, healthy habits, what we can do on a daily basis and what it looks like in reality.
I was scrolling through social media today and a little thing popped up from NPR and they were talking about The Body Electric, that show that talks about the relationship between our technology and our bodies and how we can fix it, which I'm interested today as we talk about intellectual wellness with our guests. And I'm interested to get her take on this too, because they're doing a new study. They're partnering with Columbia University Medical Center, and they're doing a study. It caught my attention because it was talking about our sedentary habits and how unhealthy they are for us. And I've really noticed myself since the pandemic, really, when everything shut down and almost all of my business went online.
Yes.
And I have really noticed the last 3 years a change in my health. And what they're doing is study about if you can just do some gentle movements for 5 minutes every 30 minutes of your workday. So I'm going to put a link in our show notes to this study because you can join the study. And I was filling it out before you and I went to work because I'm going to join that. You have to sign up by Sunday, October the 8th. And then the results will be shared on the series finale, November 7th. But even filling out the beginning stuff, I was like, oh, yeah. It's things we know when we talk about wellness and we talk about physical wellness and things like that. But I was really thinking about how, especially when you're doing computer work, I'll just speak for myself. When I'm doing computer work, and especially when I'm in the zone, right, I can go hours sometimes. And
Right.
how unhealthy that is to not be getting up and moving and breathe. I tend to breathe because that's what I do when I teach people. But also just the like getting up and taking that 5-minute break every 30 minutes is what they're proposing versus I tend to do it on the hour or every 2 hours. But I'm curious about this.
And again, and we talked about research before the call too, right? Like liking to know where the source is coming from and paying attention to things that are important in the research. One thing that I was reminded of when you were talking was sleep schedules. And that's something that I was really interested in. What did Co say?
She said she started watching that too.
We got to talk about it, Co.
It's about wellness, right?
Exactly. And I saw something about food. I said, let's see what they're cooking, right? So we can make sure that we rotate our menu out, which is something they talked about. But I was thinking about sleep schedules, and that clicked in when I was learning about occupational wellness, right? But as a restaurant manager, I wasn't getting home till 3 a.m. We're working however many hours, like I didn't want to know how many hours I was working. That's how much I was working. But I had to realize that I might get 8 hours of sleep, but I might not wake up at 5 a.m. if I went to bed, if I just got home at 3 a.m., So I think that, you walk in your labyrinth, you do your outside time. You might not have been splitting it up every 30 minutes, but you might be more active than the average person. You know what I mean?
Oh, right. Well, I was curious about that. And it
Right.
was also like asking the questions like the last 2 weeks, which we, my listeners and like the last 6 weeks has not been quote unquote normal for me. So it's fascinating to me just to have it intentional and have it in front. And, you were talking about that, about the restaurant life. We talked when I was co-leading the Secrets of Interplay this weekend. We talked about body wisdom, right? And sometimes we know when we look at our body data, when we look at our knowledge, when we bring it down to the wisdom of what do we want to create from what we know works for our bodies, that sometimes our ideal is not possible because of work or people we're caregiving or schedules, and just like you said, like noticing where we can make shifts or changes, or noticing like it may not be exactly subscribing. So our guest today, y'all, we're talking about the neuroscience of change. So I think all this weaves in beautifully. And we're talking about intellectual wellness. So Shannon,
yes,
do you have anything else to say, or should I give the definition to our listeners, and that way we can move towards getting our guest up here?
I have something to say, but I want to save it to the end. I want to go ahead. Yeah, let's wait. I want to go straight into the conversation.
All right,
and I'll come back to it.
Okay. And you wrote a note about it, right? So,
yes, I did.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Yes.
So, listeners, today we're talking about intellectual wellness. Intellectual wellness includes having access to different sources of information and developing critical thinking and timely decision-making skills. Also, continually learning through intentional intellectual growth. Situations and artistic creativity can help maintain one's intellectual capacity.
Yes.
Yeah. I was recently doing an autumnal equinox daily creative practice. And it was like a 2-week stint, and realizing how important that piece of artistic creativity helps me with my intellectual capacity to do the rest of the things I need to do the rest of the day.
What does that look like specifically for you?
Well, writing poems, doodling, doing some drawing. If it's ideal, I'm painting or something like that, but that has not been ideal recently. So it's just been like when I'm walking in the labyrinth or meditating or praying, and I come in and I write it down like in a poem. Like I think I shared one on my social media recently. And that was that creativity bubbling up out of that nature and meditation time.
Yeah, I said, there she is.
Right?
How many twigs were on the pathway from the days I hadn't been here? I said, yes, ma'am. I read it to the end. Yes. It was good. It was good.
Yeah.
So yes, let's bring our guest up. Guys, ladies, if you have been listening to the podcast for the past 131 episodes, you might know who our guest is. And we had such a good time with her and talk about her resource all the time. So we invited her back. And after 20 years as a corporate project manager, director, and executive, life unfolded for her, right? And into entrepreneurship. And she started a company devoted to support the local holistic, alternative, and integrative businesses. Lori created Ease Your Energy as a nonprofit whose mission and vision is to share practices that enhance our lives and our health. Through this company, she teaches 2 flagship workshops that teach how to harness the incredible power of the heart and the brain to create positive and sustainable transformation and change in your life. Please welcome to the stage, Lori Ives-Godwin. Excuse me. I got the Ives part, the Godwin part wrong. Welcome back.
No problem at all. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome to the stage.
Awesome.
So
you know what? Go ahead.
The last time Lori was here, literally we ended the episode and scheduled her for this episode. And that has never happened with any of our guests before. So it tells you, first of all, how excited we were about your first episode and how grateful we are to have you back and continue this conversation.
And I was just listening in from the green room going, why did I even bother taking notes? You all gave me so many juicy things to talk about in the next 45 minutes.
Right.
But for those that actually did listen to my prior one, or maybe we'll give them a teaser on why they might want to go back, I would love it if could I indulge both of you in a bit of a heart lock-in before we start?
Yes.
Oh,
please.
absolutely. Yes, please.
So everyone listening, except for those that are driving, if you just put your pens down, or if you're in the kitchen, put down what you're doing for just a moment. You don't have to sit down. You could be standing up. But I'd love everyone just to put their hand over their chest area and place their attention in the area of your heart. And with your attention there, start to breathe in a little slower and deeper than normal. Breathing in for 4 or 5, breathing out for 4 or 5, or whatever rhythm is comfortable for you. Keep your attention in that area of your heart. Feel the calm and the ease begin to seep into your breath. With attention, draw in calm and ease on your next breath. And I want you to feel it, really feel the feeling of it in your heart. Let it expand. Let it inform all your cells. And then on your next breath, come on back. And that was my second welcome to Heart.
Beautiful.
I don't know if you guys ever watch your videos again, but you're going to see that your shoulders kind of went down a little bit. Your voice got a little softer when you came back. And that is such an incredible tool. Now, it took a minute, right? And we're here today to talk about the neuroscience of change. And so what I'm going to explain to you is that you just balanced your autonomic nervous system. You just did.
I love that, Lori.
Me too.
Your breath on your inhale and your exhale trigger different parts of your autonomic nervous system. It brings it back to balance. It makes you more able to access your own innate wisdom. It lets you access your intuition. It lets you use all of the things that make you you without any cortical inhibition. And I'll talk about some of these other things again, but that's not a biohack. That's our birthright. We don't have to hack anything. That's just who we are. And so, Christine, I'm just sorry I keep doing this, but I have so much I want to share. Go ahead.
I know. No, I love it. I was
Yeah.
just thinking for folks who are listening, when you say a cortisol, like when you said, when I think about that, I think about stress, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Oh,
Me
yeah.
too.
So that's what you're referencing there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Part of the reason that I love teaching the neuroscience of change, as much as I also like teaching all these stress tools and techniques, stress handling tools and techniques, is that we do live in a world that is changing so quickly right now. I mean, the changes seems like it's coming so fast, you just can't keep up with it. There's been so many studies done that the technology, as we move through technology, Christine, you were mentioning that a little bit while I was in the green room. Technology is changing so fast that even those that like it can't keep up. You just keep like feeling like you're behind. And these tools that I am so enamored by, I'm enamored by them because they work for me and they make me exist in my world in a much more creative way, going back to your other thing you were bringing up. So when you're in stress, when your body is in stress, it is designed to keep our species alive in some ways. And what happens is we have lots of parts of our brain and they all integrate and work together and they all kind of eavesdrop on our heart. And I think that's one of the reasons that we got excited about me coming back, because the first time I spoke with you, and what was the episode number again, in case anyone wants to listen to
I
it?
can find it.
That'd be great. Just pop that in next time.
Absolutely.
So we talked a lot about the heart and handling that, but what we didn't really have time to talk about is our brain is paying attention to our heart to decide so much of the reactions that the brain is going to trigger. And when you're in stress, Christine, you're not going to be creative because the point is that your body is going to take over and your heart's going to beat a little faster. You're going to take some of the digestive, you're not going to want to be digesting when you're under stress. That's why people have irritable bowel syndrome and a lot of stomach issues when they're stressed out, because their body is actually allocating its resources to doing run, fight, hide, right? So it's going to have more blood in your fingers and your toes. And these are just things that happen. So when you're in stress and trying to be creative, or when you're in stress and you want to sit down and say, I'm going to meditate, good luck, because it ain't going to happen. Because what's happening is your brain, and this is just what we're talking about. So I'm just going to start with what we're talking about.
Yes,
Yeah,
please
go
be
for it.
specific.
Your brain has brainwaves. Everybody knows that. We've heard about that before. When you wake up in the morning, you start in a state of delta. You're sleeping. And you go from delta to theta. Theta is a little faster. Then you go to alpha, a little faster. You go to beta, a little faster yet. But when you get stressed out, you take your normal beta that we are, like we're talking right now. I'm probably in mid-range beta. I'm a little nervous. I'm a little wanting to pay attention. Got my neurons firing and wiring a little quicker. You probably are less in beta because you do this every week. So you're probably in a lower beta wave state. But it's just the speed of my brain waves. When we get angry, stressed, fearful, our brain waves are going to go to high beta, right? So our brain's going to be moving really, 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 really quickly, right? Now, here's the thing. Creativity lives in alpha. It's when your inner world can become more real than your outer world, right? When you're creative, you lose track of what, Christine? Do you know what's going on around you? You look at the clock and then what happens?
Right.
You're like,
you're more stressed.
but when you look at the clock, when you're being creative, what happens? You lose sense of time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Your inner
Absolutely.
world and what you're creating is more real to you than the lawnmower that's outside that you probably aren't even hearing, right? Or the people talking to you that they go, Christine, like, and you're like, oh, that's right, I'm here. You're not really participating in the outer world. So if I just explain to you, you got to go through all of those brainwave patterns. Now, the problem is if you're in high beta and you're stressed out and creativity lives in alpha, guess what? You've got to go a long way back down. All right. That breath that we just did, that heart mouth breath, meditation, yoga, gardening, exercise, those are all activities you can do to lower your brainwaves, the speed of your brainwaves. All right. This is rock
Interplay does
hard
that for me
science.
too. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Right. So we all can identify if you were to take out a piece of paper now, anybody should be able to identify a few things that let them calm down. I'm going to just use slang words, right? Get in the zone. Some people run. When they're running, they have no sense of anything because they're just so inside of them. So it's not about physical exertion being not having any. All right. Some people will bike or cycle or swim to this state. But what you're trying to do is actually inside of you, you're lowering the speed of your brain waves. All right. Now, I was going to do this at the end. I'm just going to move it till now so I can finish the whole concept for everybody.
Sure.
When you go to sleep at night, you do the exact opposite. So you start out in some kind of beta, and then you'll go alpha, and then you're going to go theta, and then you're going to go delta. All right. Now, I also want to explain a little bit when you're basically going from beta to alpha, that could be anything that brings you to get inside of you. All right. The next step is theta. And if anyone has ever been hypnotized, watched a hypnotist, thought about being hypnotized, that's when you are in theta. Your brain waves are slower and they're more suggestible. Okay. So you become more suggestible. So that's why you can learn how to stop smoking. And when you're in theta, that's what hypnotherapists will do. And they will they calm you down. It's that calm voice that says, climb down the ladder, go deeper, slower. By their voice and their words, they bring you into that brainwave pattern.
I just had the realization Shannon would make an incredible hypnotist. I'm just saying.
We might have to make like a soundtrack or something.
You are so right.
And not even, right. But just to like walk people down to the alpha, because I was thinking about Shalo Glow. It does bring people back. So like, come back, that's a good idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do now is, again, it's not a hack. It's just how our brains work. What happens when we get stressed? What happens when we're happy? What happens when we get in the zone? And these are ways we can self-regulate. And you don't need to use my tools or any specific tools. You just need to understand that if somebody cuts you off in traffic and you are really agitated, all right, and you're not planning on doing yoga till tomorrow morning, and you're not going to meditate till tonight, or you're not going to get out in your garden because it's already dark, we all need some tools and techniques in our toolkit to deal with the stressor when it's happening and not wait until some other time. Because while that stressor is in you, does anyone, when they're stressed out, pick up this and go like this, and then they call somebody to talk about the thing that stressed them out?
I've done that before. I'll own it.
Okay, after I process it, but I hear what you're saying, and I probably have before quickly, yes.
Mm-hmm. So Christine, based on what I just said, what are you likely doing when you're making that?
Continuing the
right.
Which I had this morning. I was taking one of our dear friends and colleagues to the airport, and somebody cut across us and stopped. I mean, it was really dangerous, and we were okay. But it was one of those moments that you immediately have that reaction, and it wasn't even anger. It was like, what is happening here? But I felt that adrenaline come up. And of course, I took a deep breath. I did, and was conscious about it. But especially, we're here in Atlanta, like that is a very common thing that happens in our traffic systems.
So if I were to then tell you that humans can make thought more real than what's in front of them, what do you think about that?
I definitely agree with it.
Right? So if we can make thoughts more real that's in front of us, and we know that basically stress creates hormones in our body that deteriorate our joints over time, that give us stomach issues over time, would you maybe make a different choice knowing that you got into that little hoo-ha, right? And if I spend 5 minutes talking to somebody about it, and then I get to work, or we don't drive to work anymore, like you said about the pandemic, but then I call somebody else or whatever, and I then tell whoever comes home to my house, can you understand that maybe a 5-minute episode has now become 20 minutes of your life?
Definitely.
All right. So how many things do we hold on to? This is a neurological principle that I'm absolutely bringing up that I wanted to cover today.
Thank you.
It's called a refractory period. And you can hold on to something like this. If it's traffic, maybe you're only going to hold on to it for a couple, hours, maybe. But what if it's somebody at work who you really felt like stole your project or stole your idea? Could you see how maybe you could hold on to that for months, reliving that experience over and over and over? And they actually say that after a certain period of time, almost 90% of what you remember about something isn't even true.
Yeah, and I've met people, and I'm sure all of us have. We've met
Mm.
people that hold on to it for years,
Right.
not
That's called
even months, right?
right. So I am who I am because 10 years ago, someone did me wrong. Right.
Mhm.
And so what I really want to encourage everyone that's listening to this to understand is you're holding on to something and poisoning yourself.
Mhm.
You are not poisoning the person who did it to you. You are poisoning yourself with your own emotion, with your own emotional reaction to that scenario. You are now making thought more real right now. Again, every time you think about it.
Mhm.
And not only are you not that much fun to hang out with at parties, and you might not be the people anyone wants to go to lunch with anymore. On top of all of that, what you're doing is you're actually recreating the chemicals that you created in the first place. And because we have a tendency to make the story bigger and bigger and bigger, like all of this is common sense, by the way. Like I'm like
Mhm.
the teacher of common sense. Like when I first figured this out, I was like, okay, this is almost hard to teach because it is just common sense coming back at you. But we don't always think about it this way. We don't
Right.
always like add all of the storylines together
Mhm.
to figure out why this is common sense. But basically, we're reproducing the chemicals. And if you do it like right before you go to bed, are you likely to go to sleep easily?
No.
No. Nope.
Mm-mm. And
So,
this is what I think about with the chronic illness, right? Because it's us reliving it over and over again. And that's
yep.
why we talk so much. And I'm glad that we talk so much about processing things, right? Communicating. For me, something that makes it easier for me not to go over it over and over again is let me process it. Let me talk about it in a healthy way and then give it to this person. If it's not my food, this is your food, this is yours, and this is yours. And we could talk about it in a healthy way and genuinely not hold on to it because some things still have to be communicated. Some stuff is for us, some stuff is to communicate. But when we hold on to stuff, that's part of what makes us sick and it's dangerous.
And I can just prove to you physiologically and neurologically, there's a reason that's happening. So like everything you just said is supported by our understanding of how our bodies work.
So I have a question, Lori, for our listeners that are listening that may have trouble letting go, right? That may hold on to stuff. How do they let it go? Like that's not my I forget things. So
Right.
like my husband is somebody that holds on to things and he'll
Right.
probably be listening to this and go, wow. but
Love you,
we
Joe.
love you, Joe. We
Yeah,
love
we
you.
love you.
But it is true. Like we're very different. We're opposite in our personalities. Like I can't remember a lot of times what happened last week and he'll tell me something I did 30 years ago.
Right.
So like how, if you have trouble letting go, do you have some tips and tricks for our listeners on that?
Yep, absolutely. I have two that I want to mention. And before I get into the two, which I won't forget because it's only two, I want to encapsulate the refractory period again because it's actually part of the answer to this question as well.
Beautiful.
You need to understand that you're doing yourself harm. That holding on to it is not just something that's you're doing, that you are actually causing harm in your body by doing that. So that's the first step actually to the answer to your question. All right. And so humans can make thought, Joe, humans can make thought more real because we have a neocortex and a frontal lobe. Most other mammals can't do that because they don't have that. Right. So we have that. And if I were to do that example that I think I even did with you on the other episode, where you're in a parking lot, it's dark, somebody's coming up on you, you hear footsteps and you start to think, oh my God, I saw the carjacking on the news. I heard about that person who got, hit, and mugged in the parking lot. Our thoughts do all of these things. It changes our metabolism. We know that. It dilates our eyes. It sends blood to our hands and our feet. It stops our digestive juices. Our heart rate goes up. Blood pressure goes up. These are physiological changes, and nothing has actually happened.
Hey, y'all, this is a great place to take a break, take a deep breath, and hear from our awesome sponsors that make Women Connected in Wisdom podcast possible. Shannon, we are so grateful that Shaylo Glow is the sponsor of the Women Connected in Wisdom podcast. And I wanted to take this moment to ask you, when you think about the people who use Shaylo Glow, who are we talking about?
That's a good question. I think about 3 groups, really. One, the group that's removing hair, right? So whether you're using laser hair removal, waxing, shaving, you got to make sure that you're putting back what you're taking out. The second group, I think about those with dry skin and the problems that might cause, right? The scars, itching, burning, whatever the situation is, you definitely need all 3 steps, right? The exfoliation, making sure you're taking the dead skin cells off. The oil, putting in the moisture, and then the shea butter with the aloe, sealing it, helping you heal. Those things help both groups, right? And third, for the third group is those with chronic illness. The story is personally from cancer and different diseases that our population is dealing with on a daily basis throughout families as individuals. So I'm thinking about my mom and my grandmother and those around me with the same generational ties, right? And what positive, healthy habits we can start to make sure that we're maintaining our wellness, especially because the skin is like the cape, the exterior, the shield for your immune system. So with COVID, we have to be intentional about covering ourselves. And those are the groups I think about.
I love it. And you know what else I love about your product? It's all natural, handmade, and it smells great, y'all. So
yes,
yay.
Tested. Yes, esthetician tested and approved. Yes. What about you? When you think about your company, what groups of people do you think about?
Well, I work with individual coaching clients. I work in community classes and with corporate teams. And with all of them, I use a strength-based, embodied approach to help folks connect with themselves and access joy, reduce burnout, and build resilience. Especially during these times, I think we need it. I think we need all the hashtag partnership power we can get.
Yes.
That person could just walk by you. They were running by you. There's nothing that happened. And now you have this huge physiological response, right? But you did it by thought alone. Okay. So now understanding that big physiological changes that happen through huge amounts of fear generate chemicals in our body that deplete and hurt our body. Shannon, that was exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
The second part of this, like part B, is when you go to fill a bucket, you can fill a bucket by turning that water faucet on full, like I just explained in that example. But what if the faucet was dripping? Would it still fill the bucket eventually? Right?
Yes.
So what if all day long, totally. So what if all day long, the thing that's bothering you, you're walking by because it's the person's cube next to you, or it's your boss and you're reading their emails, or it's someone in your family, or it's a friend. And now this drip is constant, or every time you get in Atlanta traffic, you're anticipating you're going to have a problem. And so drip, 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 right? The bucket still fills with the harmful chemicals. It just happens beneath your conscious awareness of it. And those are the ones you even want to be a little bit more careful about. We'll get to that 30-day thing in a minute because, you got to start paying attention. You got to be in intent in the present moment. Okay. So that's the first answer, A and B. Now, the second is, and I'm going to say it like kind of funny, but it's real. How many times has someone told you just to stop it, to stop thinking it? And you were like, the first reaction you have is really like, really? That's your advice? I thought you were a friend. I thought you were going to be helpful, right? That's so not helpful, right? But what if you were to understand that stop it is actually this? I have this really powerful ability in my brain to go seek out information by finding neural networks that I have built over the lifetime that I have lived on this planet. And the neural networks that I give the most power to and think about the most often are going to be the ones that I tap into the most often when I ask myself a question of how I want to be. What do I want to do? What do I think about this? How do I want to act? So your brain goes out and it goes and it finds the strongest of your neurological networks. So if you have been feeding a neurological network and giving it more and more and more power by constantly thinking those thoughts, then what is going to be the first thing that comes to you when you think that thought again? The thing you don't want. It's the very last thing you want. And so what stop it really is an unfiring, an unwiring, a lessening of the energy in your neurological networks in your brain. And if you can take stop and make me do a change it, right? So I don't want to get in my car because somebody is going to do something stupid, right? And you could go, it might not be immediate. It could be, today is going to be a day no one does anything stupid. That's not quite good enough. Maybe I'm going to do, I am so glad that I have this really fast car and that I'm super alert and aware and I don't text and drive and I am totally capable. I've never been hit and I'm going to just be fine. Right. And you kind of keep changing it till you can finally get to some place that feels super good. Right. That you can like lock
Lori.
into.
Right. I had a mentor for years and she would say, cancel that. And so I got into that habit. Like I would say something, she's like, oh, cancel that. And sometimes I'll say it and people will look at me really weird. Right. But it's that same thing about stop it or cancel it or, well, let's not speak that.
Right.
Now, yeah. You were going to say something, Shannon?
Yeah. And for me, it reminds me of this episode of Tabitha Brown's. And was it her? I think it was her and her husband's podcast. I wanted to make sure it wasn't a Instagram video or something by herself, but I was on a road trip back to Atlanta listening to their podcast and she was talking about, what do they call it? Negative positivity. When people are like, so I think it depends, right? Lori, I 100% agree with you. At the root of it, and a healthy way to take stop it, if you sift it, is do this instead, right? But sometimes if we've heard that, if it still landed like, I felt like this person didn't mean it in a good way and they're just trying to shut me down, that's fair too, because we know that women have been connected in unhealthy conversations sometimes.
Right.
And that might have been the way that that person was saying it. But when we sift information that we get from the people that we care about or the people that just tell us things, I think that is the way to take it and make it actionable for you. And why I'm so excited to write about intellectual wellness in volume 2, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. Being able to change it. And when you get something that works, now how do you make it a habit? Right? Because we know on a daily basis, we have a limited amount of willpower. So if we have countless habits from stepping out of bed, like you were talking about before, which foot hits the floor, how you brush your teeth, how we wash our hands, some things you just need to be a habit. So you're not taking that brain space. But of course, coming out of generational poverty and all of these things, as we grow to be intentionally dimensionally well, right? We have to make sure that they're effective when we are creating those pathways that we want to go to most often.
Absolutely. And I want to clarify just the stop. So when someone says stop it, I was kind of in jest a little bit, because it's, to me, what I love about it is it's grandma's wisdom, like chicken soup, that now we understand bone broth is actually good.
Yes. So good for you.
It's that ancient ancestral, like generational wisdom that we poo-poo a lot of times. But why I'm laughing about it inside, it brings me great joy, is that there's an understanding now of the neuroscience of it and why it worked and why it has lasted throughout time. Right? Because it actually does neurologically change your brain.
And
there's a Canadian, if anyone's curious about this, there was a Canadian researcher named Donald Hebb. that actually did a ton of studies on this, and you can actually see the neurons themselves connecting and growing in patterns. And then you can also see them separating. So the point for stop it and change it and all of these things is if you can catch yourself. So everything that all of you guys, when you interview people, I love your podcast because you interview people that give you those tools to help you work through things. But if you find yourself continuing to do them, before you get to the next person you can talk to or your next journaling or your next meditation, just stop it. Just stop. Knowing that power of that if I keep going there, I'm building it. I'm making it bigger in my own brain. And that's the last thing I really want to be doing. And so this is not a fake it till you make it concept that I'm trying to really point out.
Right.
A lot of teachers have that concept. This isn't that. I'm just trying to make sure everyone understands that there's a real, valid, tangible benefit of doing that behavior called stop or change. And Christine, your thing, cancel, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
It's all. So there's real validity to all of this, but we understand now that this is real. It's not something that it's not a platitude.
Exactly.
Right. I was looking at, there was a young lady, and I don't have it in front of me, so I can't tell you who she was, but it was an Instagram thing. And she's this really cute, like maybe 8, maybe 7.
Okay.
And her mom catches her giving facts. Like she'll say, did you know? Did you know? Did you know? And she said, did you know that after a traumatic event, research has proved that if you play Jenga, it will lessen your overall response to the trauma. So it's exactly what you're saying, Lori, because you interrupt like the focusing on the event or thinking about it or continuing. I mean, I haven't looked at her research. It was just one of her facts, but it's exactly what you're talking about. That if we interrupt that cycle and we change to something else.
And I have something to bridge both of those is there was this, again, on Instagram, this Instagram post that I saw that said, my mom was right. I just didn't like her tone when she said it. And I said, oh, Aunt Jen, shout out to my best friend's mom. I said, wow, that was so rude. And she was right. I just didn't like the tone, you know? So yes, if it's helpful, let's let it be helpful.
Right.
Absolutely.
So let me pull something that Christine, you brought up before you brought me on. And Shannon, you just brought up about habits. So let's talk in a little bit of a different path right now. So I want everyone to visualize an iceberg. And if you visualize that iceberg, does anyone know like how much of it is above the water versus how much of it is below the water? A lot, right? A little bit above, like 5%, like 95% below. You know, we're talking big, right?
Yes.
So part of the reason that people find change so difficult, Shannon, as you were just mentioning, it takes a while to reinforce a habit and all of those things, is largely because when we try and change something, okay, we're using our consciousness to change it. Our consciousness is the 5% of the iceberg that's above the water.
Right.
It's not the 95% below.
Right.
And your habits, your programs, and your beliefs, by the time that you're 35, 95% of them are already programmed. Now, again, that's a big number. So let me talk about why this is like, I'll give you some examples so you can believe what I'm talking about. Let's talk about you guys turning on. Do you guys drink coffee?
Yes.
Okay. So Shannon, do you know how to turn your coffee pot on?
Oh, don't have a coffee pot.
Okay. There you go. So let's just do this. When you wake up in the morning and you go about making your coffee, do you have any conscious thoughts or does the coffee kind of make itself?
No,
that your body walks itself. Your body walked itself into the kitchen, right? And it knew how to make coffee without
Not
you
a
thinking
sleepwalker.
about it.
Definitely have to be intentional.
Yeah. All right. Christine, when you got in your car, do you think about opening the door, how to put the keys in the ignition, how to like turn it on?
It's totally unconscious. Like it's a pattern of behavior. Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Right. So now all of a sudden, if you understand that we go through our day, We wake up in the morning, we get out of bed the same way, we put our clothes on the same way, we have the same routine, we might like walk to the kitchen the same way, we get in our car, we drive the same places, we see the same people, we do the same things, we watch the same shows, we read the same types of books, we go to the same restaurants, and we go to sleep at night. And then we wake up in the morning and we do this thing called a positive affirmation. We go like, I want today to be different. And then what we do is we walk back in the kitchen and we make our coffee or our tea and we get back in our car and we do the exact same things in the exact same way. And we expect something to change because we have an intention, right? But the problem is that intention is living in that 5%. That intention is living in our conscious, like our unconscious doesn't need to change, right? It's your consciousness that's seeking change. For you to get access to the parts of you that really are the ones that are holding you into the pattern, you have to be able to kind of get into your subconscious and your unconscious. And you're not going to do that in beta. If I go back to the very first thing we talked about, you're not doing that in a beta brainwave. Okay. You might start being able to do it in an alpha brainwave because in alpha, your brainwaves are slowing down and it's the door between your conscious and your unconscious. But in beta, now your subconscious is what's driving. That's what's open. And so if you really want to make changes in your life, you are going to have to do some different things. Back to my waking up in the morning example, you're going to have to introduce some new thoughts. You might have to take a new workshop, listen to a new podcast, learn some new tools, read some new books, go on, do some things that just change up your life.
Yeah.
Because if you don't introduce change, then tomorrow is going to look an awful lot like yesterday. It's going to be incredibly predictable. I could bet money on it. Okay.
And what I talk about in volume 2 as well, like part of it, because I can't give everybody everything, right? Is doing things for the first time can be daunting. And it reminds me, when you were talking, it reminds me of the difference between a bucket list and the first times list, right? As a millionaire next door, some of my stuff is going to be the same. I'm okay that it's the same outside of stalkers, people trying to follow me. We switch up stuff when we need to, right? But the things that I do to make me feel like I have control over the things that I can, it's Cecile's coloring book, right? I can pick out the colors that I color on this coloring page. I can pick out if I finish it in one sitting or come back to it. And that space, like Christine was talking about playing and different things, gives me the interruption and some parts of control that help me feel anchored while I venture off into the unknown of the first time adventures, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's beautiful. You guys are great. Okay. So I want to go back and tie this now, Christine. At the beginning, you were mentioning a study or a research thing, and you were saying, "Oh, I wonder if we're going to talk about this today."
Right.
And it kind of has to do with this concept of a habit, right?
Okay.
I have something that I do, and I might want to take a detox. Like I might want to get off social media, right? Or I might want to take a detox. I don't know if you guys follow Maya Bialik. I might have said her last name, Bialik. If you follow her podcast, but she just came off a 2-week detox of everything. No technology, no computer, no phone, no nothing.
Beautiful.
Right. I just came off a 1-week detox. I was just out in Tennessee. You just become so aware of your patterns and your programs, right? So the key here is also, which we have, one thing I think that I'll just finish in the last concept and then we can bring more things together, is for you to really, for anyone to understand how to have change, neuroscience or otherwise, you pretty much have to be in one spot and one spot alone, and that is now. If you were yesterday or thinking of tomorrow, you're not in your now. And the only place true change can take place is in the now. Right? So that's touching in with, who am I? What am I feeling right now? What am I thinking right now? You know, like where am I at in my life right now? And so when you can get in the now and you can get calm and peaceful and slow those brain waves down, you're starting to be able to access that 95%, which is where those programs, the beliefs, the patterns, behaviors. And that's why I went on a detox. I was looking for my whys. And I was doing it from my now. And it is so critical. Now, we can call that lots of different things. Lots of people call that meditation. You could call it affirmations, intentional, it could be intentions.
Right.
It could
Being
be
present.
journaling, being
Right.
present, right? It could be all of those things. And so to change then, right, is to first stop and be now and understand, why do I feel like I need to call someone to talk about the traffic thing that just happened? What am I seeking there? What do I get from it? Because the one thing that we know as human beings, we do everything for we do everything for something inside of ourselves. And so I'm not going to psychiatry people on this, right? It's up to them to figure out what their whys are.
Right.
But when I can see the behavior that I need to call and be the drama, I was a drama queen. I called people to tell them all about all the bad things that went on. And if I wasn't getting the reaction, I would call somebody else because I was like waiting to feed on that reaction. And the healing of that was so incredibly powerful. But I still would maybe find myself doing it again. And then I literally in my head yell, stop it. And I'm not always so nice to myself, but I can be nice. And so it's giving yourself permission. So like, okay, I think I uncovered all those layers, but maybe I haven't. Right. And that this podcast isn't about all of that. This podcast is about just say stop, because now I'm not feeding it. And I give myself permission to go deal with it in the ways that I'm choosing to deal with it later. But I certainly don't want to feed it right now.
And I hear what you're saying, Lori, is that if we are, and what's the official name can you say the official name of the episode again?
This
the
episode,
Neuroscience of
Neuroscience of
Change.
So if we're talking about the neuroscience of change, and you can only change right now, because even if this person cut me off, almost had an accident too the other day, it was crazy, like huge swerve around this guy, but it's not happening right now. It might have just happened, but it's still not right now.
Right.
Then we have to be present. And so I hear why you are saying you have to stop if we are going to talk about the change.
Right. And you can do the breath, you can do stop, you can do change, you can do cancel, you can do like
I
half
notice,
of the
but
tools.
not judge. Like, I notice, like, what's going on, and just look at it for a second. Yeah.
Yep.
I often use the word acknowledge.
Yeah.
I used to say I held both grief and gratitude in my body. And I was
It's
like,
too
no,
much.
I don't want to hold grief and gratitude in my body. I want to acknowledge that there's grief and gratitude. So I use that word acknowledging it, because we also don't want to bypass, right? Because if something bad happens or people are being harmed, we don't want to bypass that. But I'm also very clearly hearing you, like, we don't want to dwell on it, and we don't want to relive it over and over again and re-traumatize.
Yes.
Correct.
And I
then
think,
if you know that, Christine, and you're holding space for it, you acknowledge it. And now you've done stop or breathe or cancel right now. And then you go back and you do, whatever discipline helps you work through it, and gets you to the end of it. 3 days from now, if you're thinking about it again, you just gently say, stop again. Right? Because things tend to have cycles, and they can take a bit of time depending on how long. I've some programs and patterns that I've had for 50 years, because I've got them as a child.
Yes.
I got them from observing my parents, or I got them from observing the people around me. So it doesn't, always undo 50 years in, one session, but you give yourself that permission. But there's these other things, like I was saying, like, you don't want to hold on. You have the knowledge that my refractory period on that is just poisoning my body with chemicals I don't want. I have the Donald Hebb law, the Hebbian law. Let me rewire and refire, or unwire and, disconnect, so I don't feed that neurological network any more than I already have my whole life. I'm trying to deplete it so I find something else.
Yes.
All of these are super important. I want to slow my brain waves down. I want to get out of high beta, right? I want to have access to my intuition and my heart and all of these other things.
Yes.
So all of the tools I've talked about today, or at least the common sense that I've talked about today, are all based in our neurology, our biology, and our physiology, and they're real. And so if you believe that and understand that, now you have more power And it's not a positive affirmation. It's another story. Nothing I did today was a positive affirmation. Okay. What I was really focused on was bringing us to this understanding that if you really want to change, all of those tools are really helpful. And now that last piece, though, is you can't change from the 5%. That's the top of the iceberg. There's no change happening there. And that's why you might not be exercising. This is the final tie back to how you started the podcast.
Yes.
I know that I'm supposed to exercise. It's good for my body. I know I'm supposed to eat right because I know that that's healthy. I know that if I would wake up a half an hour early, I would have time. I mean, you could, I know yourself to death and should yourself to oblivion, right? We are all really powerful women. Why is it not changing? And what I'm very clearly telling you is because we're attacking it from the wrong percentage. You got to get down to the 95%. And the only way to get there is to slow your brain waves down, not be stressed out. And again, meditation, creativity, crafts, all of those things, the yogas, that's when you get your intuitive hits because you're not in that other brainwave pattern. That's when you get access to what's inside of you. And you can figure out. And if you can go on that week detox like I did, then what happens is in this empty space that you've now given yourself, the stuff comes up and you can look at it. And back to what you said, Shannon, like you don't judge it. It's just like you're not in that place of judging. You're like more in that place of, holy cow, that's where it came from.
Right.
I don't want it anymore. I'm leaving it here in Tennessee, which is where I was.
Right. Yeah. I love it. So I have one thing I want you to go a little bit more in depth in before we do our wisdom in action and share with the ladies what we're doing for ourselves this week. When you say the refractory period, I think about a window of time that I allow myself for different things. And it might be different, right? If it's a 3-year relationship, that's going to have a little more time than something else, a job or something that I left after a certain period of time. But how do you advise people with the refractory period? Is there some, and not that, again, we know some grief doesn't end. Some things you continue with throughout your life. Like you're saying, you just have your worry where you recenter and look at it so you can deal with it. But outside of that, is there a timeline that you usually advise that's too long or too short? What would you say?
No, because it's about the spigot and the volume of the liquid coming into the bucket to
It's about
some
the
extent.
context of the situation.
Yeah. And is it
Got
like
it.
constant? Are you constantly getting triggered? Or is it something that, it has a year anniversary, so you get
That's
triggered
fair.
once a year,
Yeah, that's fair.
but I think the answer that I really want to give, and I'll just say it again cleanly, the minute you catch yourself in your now doing it, that's when you really engage the tools. And if you can't deal with it right now, you do the stop or whatever change now, and then you start, you make it a priority because it's not serving you. Lori clearly told you that you are just creating a biochemical cocktail of things that you don't want in your body. They literally hurt you. They don't just make you tired or depressed. They literally are ruining. You're not having an opportunity to build muscle mass. You're not healing. You're not digesting. You're not doing all of these other things because you keep on making your body be in this constant state of survival awareness. And it's using all its resources for that.
I hear you.
When you really wanted to use it for anything else.
Everything
so for
else.
me, for me personally, it was almost enough just having this information.
Yes,
so now when I catch myself, I'm like, okay, I'm not
don't
poisoning
self-harm.
them.
Right.
I'm poisoning me.
Right.
It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
No. So
I hear you.
Right.
Okay.
So Lori, before we move to wisdom in action, so much good info today. If somebody wants to dive deeper with you, how do they find you? How do they work with you? How do they do that?
Thank you. So two things. First is obviously I have a website.
Yes.
I do want to take one big step before I do that and say that right now I'm certified trainer for both Dr. Joe Dispenza as well as HeartMath. And a lot of what I've covered, if not most of what I've covered, has its origin foundations in those two, like those pieces of work. Brilliant on making practical and usable across a lot of different disciplines. All right. heavily researched, heavily researched, where we are talking biofeedback devices, brain caps, urine analysis, blood analysis, all sorts of things. So there's a tremendous amount of research happening now in events that are happening now and in a lot of the things I've been sharing. Okay. So kudos to both organizations. And that's really how I sit here today. My website, where you get Lori on top of all of that, is called easeyourenergy.org. I am a nonprofit. I teach on Zoom and I teach in person. I love teaching this. Heart Math is a 1-day course for me. The Neuroscience of Change it's closer to a 2-day course because there's a lot more to it and it kind of builds and you get to understand all of these pieces. But we go through how this looks in your life. So like these 1-hour podcasts are great. You kind of dip your toe in, yeah, this sounds great.
Right.
But if anybody wanted to dive deeper and they didn't, what I just said in workshops aren't them, they love reading books, really just look up Dr. Joe Dispenza or look up Heart Math. There's an incredible amount of free content on the internet from both of them. They're both on YouTube. They're on Instagram. They're on Facebook. We can get you the links if they're not already in my bio.
Yes.
And on my website, easeyourenergy.org, I have a resource page where I have all of that on one page. So you don't need me for anything. I'm not in the business of selling workshops. I'm really in the business of helping kind of change how we live on the planet. I really think that we all were born with these tools and we don't need, they're not hacks. They're just our birthright.
I love it.
Thank you, Lori.
Yes.
Such good info.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It lowers people's need for a lot, prescription medicine, all of these things. If we can prevent these chronic illnesses, especially with the percentages and the spikes that are projected to come, absolutely worth it to take a few deep breaths and change those brainwaves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this week, Lori, for your intellectual wellness, what are you working on?
I am working on being now, being present as much as I possibly can. And it's not a destination you ever reach. It's just a journey that is well worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That was my note to myself. # be in the now. And I also said # activate alpha waves. Those
I love that.
2 wisdom in actions for this week. What about you, Shannon?
I like it. Oh, let's see. What do I want to pick? Intellectual wellness. What are we working on? Introduce change, being now. Let's see what I want to pick. I'm intentional about the action that I say I'm doing. And we talked about a lot of good stuff. What am I going to work on this week?
So many good choices, right?
I know. And I do not just throw things out just to say something. So give me, how much time do we have? Give me 10 seconds and I will decide. Let's say, keep researching. Because it's active. We're actively growing in the intellectual wellness, right? And we're working on taxes this week. And so for me, it's a huge money week. And money with my intellectual wellness is something that's helped me get into this repeatable workflow that has helped me with consistent change. And that's what I'm talking about in volume 2. So again, it's been front of mind for me. And I want to research more of Joe Dispacina's work. I wrote it down. And of course, I have your website. And researching in a couple of different ways, but that's my wisdom in action this week, ladies. Thank you so much for your time, Lori.
Lori, thank you so much for being here with us again. And we're so grateful for you, both this episode and the Heart Math episode.
And let me get that episode number 2 for everybody who was waiting for the number. It was episode 113 on emotional and mental wellness. Self-regulate your emotions.
right?
Mhm.
And we'll put a link to that episode in our show notes also.
Yes.
So
Beautiful.
check out both. Like
Yeah.
if you are listening to this one live, or if you're listening to this one on your favorite podcast app, just circle back around and check out Lori's other episode with us about heart math, and go check out all her resources. You're such a gift, Lori. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
We
Thank you.
really, we mentioned this before you came on, but we reference that episode a lot, and with ourselves, like when we're, and this one I have a feeling is going to be the same, that we're going to be like, oh,
because we have so many tools, and we have the tools, we have the connections. And like you said, this past 6 weeks, though, things have kind of been, it flies in what do you do in the moment? You keep the breath. And then let me come back to the gratitude and the joy, the gratitude and the love, is what I was thinking earlier when we were sending the nature videos and stuff, Christine. Just the love and the gratitude, So thank you, Lori.
Just give gratitude to the fact that we have such incredible bodies.
Yes.
We are capable of so much. We are powerful beyond measure. We really are. And it is just amazing as we unfold. So thank you for letting me share what I'm passionate about.
Absolutely.
Thank
you for your work.
We are so grateful to be connected, Lori. Until next time.
Right? So good.
Right? We are past our usual time, but
that's okay. It might be the longest episode, 132.
Right? Lori's just getting all kinds of firsts for this podcast.
That's okay. Yeah.
Anything we need to tell our listeners as we wrap up?
As we wrap up.
Episode 132.
Yes. I mean, what it normally is, and I know I said it last week, but just in case you did not listen to our amazing episode for episode 131, make sure you stay connected to our social media, right? We have a lot of stuff we're working on. We have the authors for volume 1 who are excited about the audio book. We have you coming, ladies. We have the future Amazon best-selling authors for volume 2. They're on the way. They're ready for their audiobook, so
coming this month.
So if you ladies like information like this, Lori said, I'm not about selling workshops. We have workshops, but it's not just about selling workshops. It's about the information. And we're going to plug you into some amazing experts, some amazing resources that we've had the pleasure of working with. So stay tuned.
Well, and I also think, like, if you join us in community, we have 2 of our authors, one from volume 1 and one from volume 2, have connected and are doing a retreat together. So, like, if you're looking for, I mean,
it's already started. That's what I saw. I was
right?
I'm so excited.
Already out there.
Yeah,
There's, depending on what you're interested in. And we're just delighted to be able to connect, to be able to lift up voices of women and the incredible work they're doing in the world. It is just,
And for me, it's also the impact on where we are, right? We get to talk about wellness and all the feel good. And then when you hear the stories, the government was supposed to shut down and all these things. And we're like, okay, but maintaining wellness. So really plugging you in a time that it's needed with resources that'll help, with people that care about you. That's my favorite thing that we do. Right. So I'm excited to see the impact and where we are at the end of the year.
Me too, my friend.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, we'll see you here live next week at 5. In the meantime, don't forget,
be well,
be wise, and be whole. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Women Connected in Wisdom podcast. On air live on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern via Facebook and YouTube. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be part of the conversation and get connected at womenconnectedinwisdom.com.